So 2 years ago, I was the maid of honor in my dear friend Nikki's wedding, and it was at the Houdini estate in LA. And it is such a magical place and a really wonderful place to have a wedding because there's nothing more magical than love. It's such a great feeling being in love, that hope and optimism and belief that anything is possible. And if I think about the other times when I have that feeling, it's at magic shows. I love magic. My dad loves magic. My sister does. Our whole family does. And we've seen a lot of magic shows over the years together. I love how magic brings out that childlike wonder in us and just invites us to play. And you share that feeling with a room full of strangers where you're all buying into the same belief. And in this divided world, that is an even more rare and beautiful thing. And some of my favorite memories with my dad are at magic shows as well. You know, just watching my dad transform into this wide-eyed kid with a huge grin on his face and just waiting for that moment. And it's kind of like we're the same age. And one of the best magicians that we have ever seen is Steve Valentine. We've seen him many times. He's a dear friend. Steve's not only a brilliant award-winning magician, but he is the ultimate entertainer. He's just got the whole package. He's a close-up magician, so of course his sleight of hand is incredible. Steve's very well known in magic circles. He's headlined at the Magic Castle in Hollywood, Vegas, venues all over the world. And I think what makes Steve one of the most celebrated magicians is his storytelling. He's got a really incredible quick wit. He tells hilarious jokes and he's so fast in every situation. I have seen him deal with all kinds of audience members, turning jaded, skeptical, I'm not going to have fun no matter what you do, into wide-eyed kids that are having so much fun. And I think the reason why he's able to read people so well is because he's also a wonderful actor. On screen, he's best known for starring as criminologist Nigel Townsend in Crossing Jordan. He played 80s rock legend in Disney's I'm in the Band and Dracula in the Monster High movies. And he's also guest starred in a ton of the big TV shows, you know, NCIS, House, Monk, The Big Bang Theory, Mom, Will and Grace, and lots of others. And if you're a video game fan, he's also known as the voice of Harry Flynn in Uncharted 2 and Alistair in the Dragon Age games and others. And he's voiced a ton of popular characters in animated series. But what I love the most about Steve and why I wanted to have him on the podcast is his honesty about who he is and all of his experiences, the successes, the failures, the lessons, all kinds of his behavior, you know, and he's just not afraid of the mess and being present with it. And he's a really thirsty learner. He's always reading. He's a massive history buff. And so we're always having the most fascinating conversations about just all kinds of stuff. And his heart is as big as the ocean. So, I think you're going to love him. So let's get the skinny from Steve Valentine. Oh, Steve, we always have the best conversations. And dear listener, I am so glad that you get to be in on the action. Do you remember when you stayed at my house and we just could not stop talking about everything from politics to magic to acting to parenting to floristry to everything in between?
While you were making these gourmet meals and just like leaving them for me.
I know, it was a great
amazing.
couple of weeks. It was a great couple of weeks. The things you get to do when you're doing guest stars on NCIS or whatever it was. So I wanna go back to what made you want to be a performer and fall in love with magic specifically.
I think I was always a performer. I think I was always that kid, you know. And but I do remember actually we had like a theatre group that would do plays at schools. There was a theatre group that would go from school to school, and they came to our school. And I must have been, I guess, my son Theo's age, maybe I was like 6 or 7, and they wanted a kid out of the audience, and so I was like, I'll do it. And they pull me up, and they take me backstage, and they're like, okay, so we're going to give you a spade, right, a shovel, and you just got to lean on the shovel, and then when we say, what are you doing? What do you think a shovel's for? You have to say leaning on, right? And I was like, okay. And they were like, leaning on, because it's funny. And I didn't get the joke. I was like, okay, I'll say it. I didn't think it was funny. I may have even said like, I don't know if it's that funny. So I go out there and I'll never forget. They go, so what do you think the spade's for? And I was like, leaning on. And the whole group, all of the auditorium went nuts. They laughed, they clapped, they thought it was hilarious. I didn't get it, but I was like, oh, I like this.
You like the feeling.
I've been chasing that high ever since, I think.
Oh, haven't we all? Oh, my
right?
goodness.
It's that one bit of attention, that one bit of, oh my God, now I've got to go back there. And
but
and
also
then,
that group of strangers in a room on the same thing, having a similar experience at the same time. There's just magic in live theatre, live experience. There's something about that for me as an audience member, not just a performer, that I just find completely intoxicating.
Is.
At a sports event, everyone cheering and hugging strangers in the same moment. You know, sports brings people together. Arts brings people together. You know, these experiences that we share. So what about magic specifically? Like, what was that it has to be me, where it was like, whoa.
I remember this kid showing me I remember this kid showing me a trick in the playground. It was like he made a knot disappear in a piece of rope. And I remember having that feeling of wonder, you know, which is just kind of the impossibility of what I've just seen. Like, you were looking at a special effect. And I remember the reactions of the kids around him, notably the girls. And just, he was treated in a different way. Everybody wanted to know him. So I remember thinking, like, and I bugged him every day until he showed me how it was done. And then I did it for everybody. And then I loved it so much that my parents got me a little box of tricks, you know, and I started reading magic books and going to the library, and it became an obsession because I just liked the idea of getting up on stage and like amazing people and kind of making them, you kind of live for that. not a moment of like, oh, you're cleverer than me. It's, I always think that's what's wrong right now with these exposure videos that are all over the internet that are exposing magic tricks. It's just some guy going like, you know, here's how it's done, and they don't realize that that's not what magic's about. It's, you know, it's not about whether it fools you. It's about how you make someone feel, right? You make them feel like a kid. You make them feel. I've had
like anything's possible.
Yeah, I've had grown men. I've had soldiers who are back from, you know, deployment who have said they felt like children again, and thank you for like giving me 2 hours where I didn't have to think about the shit that I've seen, and just, you know, this is why adults love it. I see it in The Illusionists when we go tour. We'll have like little kids. The show works on a certain level with them. You got your teenagers. Show works on a certain level with them, although you'd never know. And then you've got the adults who are the biggest kids of all, you know, and you see their eyes go wide. And I've had people on stage who shook their head. I did have one soldier once who got very angry with me in the close-up room at the Magic Castle because he said, there is no way you could have done what I just saw. So you must have set up the whole room. You know, like, and I said, that's the biggest compliment you can give me, but I swear to God, but the card was signed and it was in the Tic Tac box. I'm like, yes, that's.
Oh, I love that trick that you do.
Yeah, right. So like I said, you've just experienced what it is to feel magic and wonder, and it frustrated him, but at the same time, by the end of it, he was just like, wow, he just.
That's what my dad's like. You know, he's your number one fan, right? And we've seen you at the Magic Castle, you know, several times. We've seen your one-man show, blah, blah, blah. It's just, he's in his 80s and he just gets in the car after, you know, seeing one of your shows or another magic show and just goes, oh, I don't know how he did that. Wasn't that amazing? And it's just, he's just filled with endorphins and just seeing this 80-something-year-old man who's traveled all over the world and just being brought down into, not down, I shouldn't even say down, just into the wonder of play.
And who doesn't want to have that impact on people? It's a positive impact. There was a lady this year. I was working in Pittsburgh at Liberty Magic, which is a specifically dedicated magic theater, which is amazing. And you do these long runs. People go and do one-person shows there, and it's really great. And I remember this lady coming up to me afterwards and saying, "I don't like magic shows. I didn't want to come tonight." She goes, "I didn't want to come." She goes, "But I was crying and I was laughing and I felt like a little girl again." And it's just, you fight through whatever being an adult has been to these people, to everyone. You know, everyone's gone through this journey where we get, is there a Santa Claus? Are there fairies? All these things, all of these mythologies, they get burst around us to the point where we're like, we don't believe in anything anymore. And then you just kind of go, you know what? I just saw something that I cannot explain. And I like how that makes me feel. So those exposure videos where, you know, you're scrolling through Instagram and suddenly you see how a trick works. that's just bursting the bubble for the audience. That's destroying the experience for the audience. And I think they think they're just hurting the magicians. Well, actually, most of the guys who are doing that are just doing it for money, right? They're doing it for likes. I think it's bullying. I think they're using their position to make money off of, by hurting other people. You hurt the magician because he can't do that trick anymore because now everyone knows how it's done. And you hurt the audience member who just wants to like go to a magic show and enjoy it. And now they can't get that out of their head how it's done. So I wish they wouldn't do that. I guess this is what I'm doing. But
Yeah.
for me, this is where I'm going. But for me, it's the reason I like magic is I love those moments, when people are just authentically human again, and all the masks have dropped off,
So what was it in you that at the age of 10, you're going through the library, you're teaching yourself this magic, you don't know other magicians,
right?
You meet the South End sorcerers and you decide you're going to go into this magic competition at the age of 10. Like, how do we jump from, I'm sort of just doing this for fun at home because I'm just obsessed with it and I love it, to I'm going to go in this big competition and stand in this hall and do it in front of a whole bunch of people. I mean, that's terrifying to me. There's no way I'm doing that. Like, I might do some little simple card trick, but I'm not going in some competition at the age of 10.
Because and I have the cutting from the newspaper cutting still from that moment, because I wasn't a member of the South End Sorcerers at that point. I didn't know any other magicians. It was just me and my magic books and my props. And my dad would buy me a couple of tricks Mum and Dad would buy me a couple of tricks every Christmas. But I worked on this little magic act. I'd done it at school, I think, or invited a bunch of friends over and did it for them. That was my first lesson in marketing, by the way, was setting up a magic show in my garage, telling my friend to let everyone know I was going to do the magic show. And then he didn't tell anyone, so nobody came, And I was angry at him, and he's like, "Oh, you shouldn't just rely on me, And I was like, "Yeah, you have to get the word out. You have to get the word out, Steve."
Yep.
Marketing lesson 101. But no,
Yes.
So I saw this ad in the South End. It was called the Evening Echo, which was a local newspaper. And it said that there was a magic competition. And the first prize was, I think it was like £50 and free tickets to the movie. And the movie was an X-rated movie. It was called Magic, but with Anthony Hopkins, which is a fantastic, based on the book by William Goldman. And it's available. Actually, I just watched it again on Tubi, and it was fantastic. It holds up. So this movie, so the guy who owns the movie theater is like, I'm going to promote it. He knows marketing. He's like, I'm going to promote it. Right, by having a magic competition, to promote the opening of the movie Magic. Great idea. All the press was there. I remember walking in, and I had this little 8-minute act. And I remember walking and seeing all of these magicians for the first time. I didn't know there were so many in town. I didn't know. And just, I go and do my act, and I wasn't very good, but I was 10. Right, so everyone else was an adult. So I
8 minutes. You said little 8 minutes for a 10-year-old. That seems like an eternity.
It was. Yeah, it was. It was an eternity. Right? Yeah, I remember I did a floating ball trick, a thing with billiard balls, and produced a rabbit from a box, hypnotized the rabbit. But that was it. And I just, they let me win because it was a good story. See, again, lesson in marketing. They said to me, "We're going to let you win because we like the fact that we can say he's so young, he can't even take part of this prize. The X-rated tickets, I couldn't go see the movie." So it gave the reporter something else to hook into the story. So, but in that process, I met Dick Turpin, who was this old street performer.
Yeah,
He was a real magician. He just spent his whole life working the streets of London. He used to be a bit of an itinerant magician, lovely guy, super sleight of hand expert. I mean, he must have been in his mid-70s then. And he told me about about this local magic club, which I didn't know existed, called the South End Sorcerers. And they invited me to a meeting. And I remember my mum took me to the meeting, and it was just like my people. I walked in, and it was like, I'm home. And they bent the rules. The secretary, I think, was Brian, but they bent the rules to let me join because it was an adults only club. And that kind of act of kindness was amazing. So once a month I would go to this above this local pub, and all these magicians would gather, and we'd have lectures and swap tricks, and then Dick Turpin, as I got a little bit older, when I got like a day job, he'd come visit me at my day job. You know, sometimes at this department store where I was selling clothing, sometimes he'd show up in a top hat and a cape, and I'd be like, you can't do that, Dick. It's embarrassing. You know, you do a hop, skip, and a jump, and I'd be like, but
Oh.
he was so lovely, and he just wanted to share everything with me. And I remember he was in his 80s. I think he was in his 80s. He was old, and he was still learning stuff.
Yeah.
Right, he was learning the
that's a
zither at one
beautiful role
point.
model.
I remember going over to visit him, and he was learning how to play the zither. And I remember thinking, like, as you would as a kid, you would just think, "But you're so old now. Why are you bothering to learn anything new?" You know, and his whole mantra was, "You have to stay sharp. You have to stay alive." And I wanted to learn how to play this, and yeah, he was lovely. So he taught me a lot.
Oh, what a fantastic
Yeah.
role model. So being in that group, breaking the rules, going and doing that competition at 10, is that what really instilled in you that why not me? Why not
Yeah,
me? Of
because I
course
was
it has
like,
to be me. I mean, it's one of the things I admire about you.
thank you. You know, I have always been like, well, if they can do it, I can do it. And I'm not to say that
Oh,
I
I
haven't
love
had a
that.
ton of imposter syndrome, because I have, you know, and
We all do.
right.
I have that every day.
You know, this is your podcast, right? Yeah. Okay.
I know. Yeah, thank
You
you.
are a
Thank you. Yes.
podcaster, Tess. You
Thank you.
are.
I am a podcaster. Yes, I am a
Repeat
podcaster.
after me.
I am a podcaster.
There
Yeah,
you go. All right.
totally.
Uh,
Thank you.
But I just feel like, I remember my mum said that when I was really young, we'd watch the Oscars, and I would be like, one day, Mum, I'll be there getting an Oscar. Like, for me, it was, I feel, and if I heard stories or read interviews of people, and this is what they started from here and they ended up here. And I thought, well, it just always seemed the journey that I was never destined to stay in my hometown. I felt destined that I needed to go places and do things. It was hard, and quite often, especially in England, you know, there's still a pretty dominant class system, especially if you want to break into acting. At least back then, especially, you needed to go to one of the top 5 theater schools, which my folks couldn't afford. And, you know, so there was a lot of that. It was very hard. I did theater, but it was incredibly hard to get an agent back then, which is why I went to LA, you know, in the end. But you always kind of feel, you just see the stories of everybody comes from somewhere and they're successful. So I think the naivety of youth is a very powerful thing. You know, you just kind of go, okay. And in England, there is this kind of often spoken attitude of who do you think you are? Don't get above your station. You know,
we have that in Australia. We call it the tall poppy syndrome.
You want to be a star.
Absolutely.
I remember people would say to me, "You want to be an actor? Who do you think you are? Tom Cruise." And now other people would say, "You want to be a magician? Who do you think you are? David Copperfield, Paul Daniels, David Nixon." There was always these kind of like, "Who do you think you are?" And there's something, and I was thinking about it just the other day. There's something about having a quiet confidence, not an arrogance, but a quiet confidence when you can believe that at some point you're going to achieve the thing you want to achieve. Maybe not in the way you originally envision it.
Oh, it never plays out exactly the way you think it's going to.
Never. No. God laughs at the plans, right? It's just
absolutely.
And often it's for the better, because you didn't know something. It's like, you ever bump into an old flame or someone you had a crush on, and then you bump into them years later and you're like, thank God they didn't like me. You know?
Oh God, it's the corrective. Absolutely. Right? I love those corrective experiences where you see it through a different lens
Brooks
and you
wrote
go,
a whole song about it called "Thank God for Unanswered Prayers."
Absolutely. Sliding doors. I love to see the road not traveled and go, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. It's that Scrooge moment. You're like, oh, okay, I can let that one go. I can let that one go. I feel like,
yeah. Take me inside how your father's death, you know, when you were 16, right? I mean, that's a really pivotal time for anybody, but for brutal. Boys, you know, and their fathers.
Yeah.
How did that inform your, I'm not staying here. I got to get out of here. I'm destined to go overseas.
Yeah. Gosh. I mean, I had just competed in the Young Magic Circle in London, which is the big magic, international magic club that had a Young Magician of the Year competition. And my dad had taken me up, and I just competed in it and come second. And I remember coming home being disappointed but my dad was a kind of a guy of few words. You know, he worked really hard. He commuted every day to London and back. And I remember him going in the kitchen with him and my mum, and then I remember my dad saying that he was proud of me, which was, I was like, it was really quite something. And he gave me a hug, you know, that
Was
I
that the
come so
first
far.
time he'd ever said that to you?
I don't, he must have been, because it had such an
Wow.
impact on me.
Yeah.
And not that he was a cold person, but just
Yeah.
British, you know. And I remember that moment distinctly. And then and then a couple of weeks later, I'd gone to a meeting of the South End Sorcerer Society. He'd picked me up. We were driving home, and I talk about this in the show as well. I remember having I guess it was almost a prescient moment where I was like, what would I do if my dad had a heart attack right now? Just kind of that feeling of, you know, how do you handle an emergency situation like that, you know? And it was weird. And that night, I was up. He poked his head in the living room and asked me if I was going to bed. And I was like, no, I'm going to stay up and read some magic books. And he said, okay, bye. And that was the last time I saw him alive. And it's just, this, I have this memory of him saying bye, not good night, you know, this kind of closure moment in a weird way. It was about halfway through the night, there was a loud crash. He'd had a heart attack in the bathroom. The paramedics came, they took him away. And they took my mum with him. And my sister was in college and my brother was in the army at that point. So it was just me in the house. And I stayed at the house, and then we got a phone call saying, you need to come because your dad's not doing so well. And I got a taxi there. And I remember, and looking back now, and this is really messed up if you think about it. I don't think I've ever talked about this, but I remember walking in, the doctors pulling me into a room and saying, okay, listen, your father has passed away, but we haven't told your mother yet because we want to get some friends here for her. So you're gonna sit with her and just
Oh.
don't tell her, okay?
Oh.
And for like 20 minutes, I sat in that waiting room,
Oh.
knowing that my dad had died, but not being able to have any emotional, like, talk about repressing an emotion, right?
Oh.
Just shock until her friends arrived, and then yeah, and so
Whoa.
that was fucking brutal.
That I have so many opinions about that. I
Right?
mean, oh gosh, wow.
You know, it was harsh. So that
Yeah.
moment really, like, we were kind of a splintered family in that my brother was in the army cadets, my sister was in university, and I was in and out doing things. But I do know that from that moment, then it was my mum and me for a long time, right? And we were living at home, and then my mum would drive me to all of these kind of gigs or shows and events. And then she eventually got a boyfriend, but it was all, you know, she got this boyfriend.
How you say that?
So many stories there, but they're not mine to tell.
Yeah.
But that, losing my dad, losing that anchor, and I remember it just coming after he'd said he was proud of me, and just at a point where I felt like I was getting to know him. Like I felt
Oh,
robbed by that losing that father
yeah.
figure. And I think I protected myself by just isolating and just focusing on my work and on my magic. And I was a member of a theater group at the time, and I just kind of focused on that. I just emotionally just kind of shut off. I remember, you know, things happen in life. I always think there's these signposts in life that if we're aware of them, they're everywhere. And I talk about them all the time too. It's like, if you look around, there are signposts that tell you whether you're on the right path. Sometimes they'll make fun of you. Sometimes it's a sarcastic comment after something just happened, you know. Like I just got an award for like being an inspirational performer, but at the exact moment I found out I got the award for being an inspirational performer, I was sick and throwing up into the bar, and I was like, this is like, if they could
That's the
see me
universe
now,
going,
you know.
Awards
Yeah,
might be seen as to some as great. Other times it's
yeah.
like, whatever, who cares?
Well,
I
yeah,
know.
this is hilarious.
Yeah.
This is a moment where the universe is like have a sense of humor, and then
Yeah.
and then you can be doing something, and there'll be a lyric in a song or on a billboard or something that connects directly with what you're thinking or going through at the time,
Totally. But
right?
you've got to receive that and see it.
You got to be
And I
open
think
to
that
seeing
that's
it.
what you
Yeah,
do so beautifully in life. I see that as a friend of yours, but
thank you.
also as a performer. You
Yeah,
really bring all of these elements together, and it is always a very human experience watching you perform. And you're a
it is
master
now. I mean,
storyteller.
I kept the live performance and the magic. Like when I decided to quit the magic, when I decided just to focus on the acting, that's having that side of me blocked off for the longest time. When I finally decided to get back into it, like the
Mm.
floodgates opened. Not like
I
people
want to
came
I want
back
to
into
go
my
into
life.
that because it's
Well, you were
it,
right there. I mean, maybe I'm
I
jumping all over the place here, but I'm just
No,
saying, like,
go jump away. No, I mean,
okay,
that's what's so great about these conversations. They go where they go, right? And our
right,
our,
right.
our minds are labyrinths, and yours is like a
Uh,
magical kind of
nah,
cavern of memories and ideas, just like everybody.
just a cavern, really.
Yeah, no, I want to go back to what you were saying about I closed off.
Yeah,
I cut this big part of myself, feeling, emoting, experiencing. What opened you back up again?
I had uh, decided that the magic was getting in the way of the acting. I was doing both in LA, and I was doing auditions and bumping into people that I knew from magic gigs, and I felt like I wasn't being taken seriously as an actor. So I needed to. I had a number of incidents happen, and I needed to. Uh,
But wait a second. Sorry, I want to go back for a second.
yeah,
Did you back then, because you didn't maybe have a conversation you wanted to have with your dad in that moment where you said, I'm just going to keep doing magic tricks, you associated doing the magic with your father's death? Is that what closed you off, or that
no,
brutal experience in the
no, because
hospital?
I kept on doing the magic after that. It wasn't
Okay.
because in fact, right after that, shortly after that, I got a job at Butlins and then a job in Yugoslavia entertaining people. So
Okay, so it wasn't the magic,
it
but
wasn't,
when you said
yeah.
it closed me off, the
So
emotions, the
so when
feeling.
I went to LA, I decided I could work
Yep.
as a magician to make money. It's that crazy. It's stupid. It's stupid. You go like, I'm going to break in as an actor, and how are you going to pay for that? By doing magic shows. Like it's both entertainment and none of which is guaranteed, right? None
But
of
you
it
know
is
what was so
a
great when you
regular
moved to
job.
LA with your girlfriend?
Yeah,
You found an apartment up the street from the Magic Castle.
by chance.
Talking
Yeah,
about signposts, right? I
yeah.
mean,
It was the
that
first apartment.
story is
Yeah,
crazy.
it's the first apartment complex we stayed at, and it was owned by an English couple. And because I was from England, they gave me a break. I was on a holiday visa. I didn't have like a credit or a social security number. And
And
she
you
also
followed a
found
girlfriend to LA, right? That's why that was the
my,
it has to be
yeah,
me.
yeah, this girl
Okay.
that I just married on the spur of the moment.
Oh,
That's
that's
another
right.
story. But I have a tendency to be a bit reckless. And anyway, so it doesn't matter. But the point is that we'd gone to LA, and we didn't know anyone, but we just happened to this lady, this English lady who rented to me, Norris and Joan. And then Joan said to me, actually, she goes, my day job, she says, I work for Giorgio's in Beverly Hills on Rodeo Drive. She goes, and I know across the street is a place called David Orgell's Silver Antique Shop. They're looking for a salesperson right now. And I was like, oh, I could sell anything, my British accent. And so she got me an interview, and I worked there for 6 months. So I went from being in Southend-on-Sea, to Rodeo Drive, like selling hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of antiques to people like Jimmy Stewart's ex-wife, widow, or
Wow.
just these massive stars. And it was talk about a culture shock. And then, but that was right by the castle, so I ended up going up there, auditioning, and then working there whenever they needed. I made a deal with the one of the hosts, the managers there, where if they ever needed an extra performer, they just give me a shout. They would page me, right? And back in the day, and then I just run up and do the shows, right? Because I was right there, and I made an extra $50 a night anytime I wanted to do a show. But more importantly, I got to give out my business cards and
Back when we did that, yeah.
yeah, back when we did that, we weren't supposed to at the castle, but we did it anyway. And that's just kind of and so what happened was I ended up kind of becoming the Beverly Hills party circuit guy. Like I started working with all these big multimillionaire clients.
Yeah.
Lawrence Kasdan, Randy Newman was my first ever, the songwriter. Randy Newman was my first ever celebrity client. I remember arriving at his house, and there was a massive white piano in his living room. And I'd read this thing about, if you look at the book, when you're in someone's home, look at their book collection, look at their library. It tells you everything you need to know about the person, right? And I
Yeah.
remember looking at it and seeing all of these musical books. And then I saw The Three Amigos, and I'm like, no one's got the novel to The Three Amigos. It's got to be Randy Newman. It's got, and it was. And I did shows for him for years. And so what ended up happening was that I was entertaining the people that I wanted to be. And
Yeah.
so
What did
there
that
was
feel like?
you're so close, right? You're so close and
Yeah.
you're so far at the same time.
And you
And
told me stories about these people acting
yeah,
very badly.
yeah. Well, that
Like
was
you
this. Yeah,
performing at someone, huge, massive A-list star's birthday party, and everyone in the room is talking and making crass jokes, and they're not even watching you perform.
not
So you
watching
just
me. And
feel
there was
like
a
this.
there was a guy in the audience
Oh,
who was on his phone loudly being super obnoxious. And I remember saying, I come from a British working men's club. So when someone heckles or is being obnoxious, you throw a line out, you heckle a line, it can
yeah.
be some kind of generic put down that gets them to shut up. But Americans are very sensitive, and it doesn't matter how rude someone in the audience is being. You're not supposed to be that, you're supposed to handle it. I don't know. It doesn't say that in my contract, but everybody seems to think that's the deal. And I remember him saying, I remember doing some line, and he said to me, "Why don't you go do your act in the corner? And if anybody wants to watch it, they can come over there." And I'm like 23, 4. It was brutal, and all of those. So yeah, I had these wonderful experiences, and then experiences like that, and I was terrified it was going to destroy my chances of breaking in as an actor. So yeah, one day I just decided I'd had a dinner with this guy Ray Stark, who was a big Hollywood producer. He did movies like Night of the Iguana and Funny Lady, and kind of was a big Hollywood producer. And he'd invited me to his house for dinner. I met him at the Magic Castle. He said, "I want to talk to you about a movie." And I was like, yes, it's great. So I go to his house, which is Rock Hudson's old house. And so there's this sprawling estate. There's a cop car in the front. I'm like, "Are the police here?" And he said, no, I just bought that. I parked that there. It keeps the thieves away. Yeah. Right.
I mean, they do that on that famous Sunset Boulevard house with all the people in front. I
Yeah,
think Bill
yeah,
Cosby lived there at one point or something. And there's always a police car sitting there with nobody in it, and they
yeah.
do the same
That's
thing.
exactly what.
Gosh,
In fact, I did
oh,
my first Beverly Hills event was at that house. At the time, it was owned by as all these kind. For
honestly.
those people who don't know, there's like a whole family playing ball outside
Yes.
just
It's
off
like
of
this
Sunset.
iconic house on Sunset
Yeah,
Boulevard. Yeah.
yeah. It was owned by a guy called Stanley Black, who was a realtor, and he had a real estate guy, and he had this massive garden party. And I remember going up to this one table to do close up magic, and Milton Berle. There was a guy. There was George Burns, Milton Berle, and Cesar Romero were sitting at the table, and a comedian called Jack something or other. And I remember starting my act, and then Milton Berle going, "The kid's doing my bits, the kid's doing my lines, the kid's doing my
Oh,
magic," because I didn't realize he was really into magic. And
yeah.
then I remember being so excited that Cesar Romero was there, and I said to him, "Oh, I loved you in Batman, like you were my favorite, the Joker, And I guess that's the worst thing you could have said to him, because he was so
Oh,
mean to me. He was
oh,
so nasty. But that memory of old Hollywood, kind of, all there with their dogtooth coats and jackets,
mm,
like smoking cigars, and just that was at that place. That was at
yeah.
that place with the statues. But
So you
Ray
with your
Stark,
producer with his fake police car.
yeah, right. So Ray Stark. So he did. So he gives me. We have dinner. There's a whole bunch of people there. We have to sit and watch a movie. Which when you used to go to a house party in Hollywood, they'd always have a movie sent over by the studio. Right. It was so Hollywood, and it was a genuine, like, reel to reel movie. And you would go in their screening room, and they would put it on. And in this case, it was. So this will give you an idea of what year it was. It was American Pie, and Ray was an older guy, and he didn't really understand what was going on in the pie scene. I don't know if you remember the famous pie scene. And he was like, he wanted someone to explain what the hell was happening, and nobody did. But everybody left, and then it was just me and Ray, and he gave me the script, which was Houdini, and he said, and I was like, what role can I play in this? And he was like, no. He says, I want you to help me with the magic tricks. Because he said he had Tom Cruise to play Houdini. It's funny, I looked it up recently, and there's a whole history of him trying to get this movie made for years. But he told me he got Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise would be amazing as Houdini. He's so perfect for it. But I wish I still had the script as well. But he said to me, he said, I want you to help me develop the magic tricks for the film. And I remember saying, I'll do that for free if I can get like a part. Can you give me a part in the film? And he said to me, like, what are you talking about? You're a magician. He was like, what are you? Are you a magician? Are you an actor? You got to make a choice, And so that was kind of one of the reasons why I decided to quit the magic, which I did for almost 10 years, and started working a lot as an actor and missed the magic. And then I was in New Zealand, and I bumped, and it's my day off. I'm in Auckland, and there's a little magic shop there, and I go in there. I figured no one's going to see me in New Zealand, right? I'm paranoid.
I'm allowed to be into magic here.
Yeah, I'll go look in the magic shop and there was a guy in Auckland there who was part of the South End Sorcerers when I was a kid. And he'd moved his family.
What are the odds of that?
What are the odds? We ended up having dinner. His name's Brian Oakes. We had dinner. He had video of all the old guys from my childhood, from my memory, including my old mentor, right? And I just looked up at the stars, and I was just like, all right, I got the message. It was just, at some point you have to say,
wow,
this doesn't happen for you not to do anything about it. There's a reason. Yeah. And so that whole story became integral to my one-man show. And I ended up learning the trick that Dick Turpin always wanted me to do, that I couldn't do because it was too hard. And I ended up closing the show with that trick every night.
I remember. It's pretty incredible.
The crazy thing is, you remember when I did this, because you were there in LA when I put the show on. It was my way of saying I'm back with magic, but it's okay to be everything. It's okay to be an actor and a magician, was to do a show that was a narrative-based show and kind of present everything on an equal footing. And the crazy thing is during the course of that run, all these doors opened, all these people from my past suddenly appeared. Like the guy that booked me on the cruise ship which ended up taking me to the States was in the audience one night. This would have been some 30 years later.
Yeah.
And he just happened to be in the audience as an older guy. But I'm like, you're the guy that booked me in the middle of the show. I was like, wait, you're the guy that booked me. And he goes, yeah, you got better, which I thought was the best tackle ever. And then I talk about the girl, Sue, who had said to me when I was a teenager, like, you should go to America. You've got nothing keeping you here. You've got no roots here. Why don't you just go to America and try and break in over there? Because I was complaining about how hard it was to get an agent in London. And she goes, we should just go to America and you'd be special, you'd be like this English guy and you could you go knock on doors. And that was one of the inspiring factors of why we ended up going to Hollywood. But I get a message from her saying, you might not remember me. My name's Sue Devaney. I'm an actress in England. And remember when we were kids and we talked about going to LA and you actually did it. And she said, I'm going to be in Hollywood. Any chance you want to grab a cup of coffee? And I'm like, I'm doing a show right now where I literally mention your name.
Just unbelievable,
right?
Isn't it?
So then I got that moment where I was like, and she's in the audience tonight, and got to.
Look, I came to see that show 3 times. And I saw the reboot of it at the Magic Castle where you streamlined it down, but I saw it twice in LA, that beautiful little theater. And it was very emotional because there were so many people, that knew you, were part of pieces of your story. And you were very honest and raw in that show about the trajectory and really owning the parts of yourself, and making fun of yourself, being very honest about Ina and your kids and your family, and to me that was the magic of the show. Like, yes, you dotted magic tricks throughout, and you are a brilliant, magician. But to me, that was the magic.
You know
Was
what's funny?
you going, this is who I really am, as you were saying before about just when you take down the masks of being an
Yeah,
adult and you
that's
allow
when
yourself to
people
show
lean
up as
in.
that child.
That's when
Yeah.
everybody leans in. They can sense
Yes.
that you're being genuine, and that was the
Yeah.
biggest lesson for me. Was the beginning of that show was 45 minutes of nonstop magic, which then comes to a sudden halt when I pretend that something's gone wrong. And it's a very kind of like, shit, fuck, I got to turn the lights on. Something's happened. And I let all of that air, all of that energy that we've been building up, I just let that completely dissipate, which is a very scary moment. And then I grab a chair, I sit down, and I start talking to the audience and telling them about how I'm amazed I'm here because I quit magic 10 years ago and I swore I'd never do
Yeah.
another magic trick again. And I take them into the journey, right? And the most frustrating and yet eye-opening moment was when people would say to me, "We love the magic. It was great. The first 45 minutes, all that magic and comedy. But when you sat in a chair and started talking to us, that's when we really leaned in." And you go, and I'm like, well, it takes me an hour and a half to set up the first 45 minutes of the bloody show, and no one cares. I needed to do it in order to show this is what I am and who I am and what I can do. Imagine giving this up, and going down this road, and then this is how I come back to it. But it was a big lesson. You can sit in a chair and tell a story, and you see it with, I don't know if you've ever seen Fleabag, but the
Please. I
actual
mean, I
play
watched that 4
series is great.
times,
Yeah,
the
have you seen the
entire 2
play?
seasons. It's
That
a
if you
work
see
of
the live
genius.
play, in the live play, she's that character, and she sits in a stool and she doesn't get up for like 90
Yeah.
minutes.
Yeah, the National Theatre Live
Yeah,
recording. Yeah, I've seen that too. It's
amazing. It's
very
so
powerful.
inspiring.
And there's power in stillness too. I mean, I think that's something you learn as a performer when you get older, that we don't need
Sure.
to be moving around and look at me and, being interesting.
Yes.
We can just
Yeah.
be still and present and full of what's happening. And for me, when I saw the show, that is what worked. Wasn't that
That
just
was
that
the
you were
design
sitting
of
and
it,
that you
right?
were still. It was that you were being
Yeah.
very honest.
There was that whole idea of having just a frenetic, chaotic, comedic, magical opening section, and then suddenly whoosh, you bring it down to a guy sitting in a chair in a spotlight. And now people are like, we thought we knew what this show was, and now we've no idea what we've come to. And I like that idea of building up an expectation and then destroying it, which in really is what magic is all about. We take people down garden paths, and then but there's always a brick wall at the end of that garden path, and we kind of, that's what magic is, and storytelling, right?
I mean, talking about this, it's not what we thought it was going to be. Oh, gee,
Yeah,
what have I gotten myself into? I mean, we experience that every day with
every day.
experiences, right?
Yeah,
So going into some of the things that have happened in your acting career,
yeah,
so many of those things didn't play out the way that you thought they were going to either, So you're a
no,
jobbing actor, you're getting all these, one-liner parts and then co-stars and then wanting to get guest stars. And then you land, Crossing Jordan, which
yeah.
didn't turn out to be what it was supposed to be either. So take me inside of that. It Has to Be Me, where you got that
I would say
role.
Crossing Jordan was what I had. That series was great. I thought it was going to lead to something else that didn't pan out, but it was 6 years on that show.
But it wasn't supposed to be a series regular, was it?
Oh, I see
Am I
what you
getting
mean.
that
Yeah,
right?
no, it wasn't. It was, I had done a bunch of guest stars, and I was doing a recurring character on a sitcom called Nikki for the WB, and one of the other recurring characters, we were kind of, it was a Bruce Helford show who was doing the Drew Carey show at the time. And I remember I was in almost every episode, but I was only being paid as a guest star. So it was a bit
Oh,
cheeky.
they
It was a bit
do
cheeky,
that,
right?
don't they?
So they introduced me every day at table reading every week. And they're like, Steve's a member of the family. And I'm like, yeah, right. I'm like Ruprecht. I'm like the guy in the basement. But there was another guy, Brad, who was in the same situation. Brad Henke is a lovely actor. and he was playing a wrestler in the show. And Brad came in one day, and I remember thinking, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this anymore. And I was like, no, I don't want to piss off the WB, and maybe I just schmooze with the executives and get something out of it. So I was letting them kind of take advantage of me. And Brad came in one day and he said, I just auditioned for this show, the Untitled Tim Kring Project. He said, but I'm not right for it. He goes, but I think you'd be great for it. You should tell your agent about it. And I remember telling my agent, he hadn't even heard of it. It was useless. He hadn't heard of it at all. So he got me the audition, and then there was going to be just the guest star, possible recurring. Yeah. So we did the pilot. I got it, did the pilot. And then when the show got picked up, at that point, I had like 5 national commercials on running at the time. And so I was in a bit of money, and I felt like I was on a roll, and it gives me shivers.
I remember meeting you at one of those auditions. You and I were at the same audition, and you were on a roll booking everything. That was such a great time.
I was the wacky guy. I was the whatever they wanted, the artistic wacky guy. And I just remember thinking, they said that they want you back for the series as another guest star, recurring character, and they wanted to pay me half of what they paid me for the pilot. And I was like, and I remember just thinking, no, I'm going to be paid. You don't have to pay me a lot of money, but at least pay me like this, at least pay me something more and
that's a ballsy move when you really want to be an actor and you're trying to break in and you get this really big opportunity. I mean, that's
it was, I remember my agent was like, what? I was like, no, you got to go back and fight. Just get me a little bit more money. And because what happens when you work on a television show a lot is you can no longer you think the door opens for commercials, but actually the door closes because you're now kind of synonymous with that show.
And you were playing a very specific kind of a role in that show too.
Yeah. I mean, he was a criminologist, kind of gothic criminologist who worked in the morgue, right? So so I go and anyway, so they came back and said, yes, all right, fine, we'll pay him a little bit more. And I went in and did the second episode, and I remember just like consistently like talking to the writers and the producers and trying to just be memorable, right? And then by the 5th episode, I remember saying to my agent, "It's happening again. I'm in every episode, but I'm a guest star. I'm not a series regular." And I was about ready to say, we need to have that conversation with them. Or maybe I'd actually said that to my agent. And my agent called me back and said, so weird, they just called and said they want to make you a series regular. And so we're like 13 out of 23. Ended up doing all of them. And I was off. It was a case of believing in yourself, believing that you're worth something. The arrogance of youth, the naivety, definitely. But also just, there was something about the time and the place and that character in that show that just fit so well. Yeah. Just, it was great. And so initially the show was story based, even though there was like the body of the week. There was a lot of it was about what was going on at the coroner's office, the characters, the interaction between them. And then CSI came out and was a massive hit and was all about the DNA, right? And so suddenly the show changed and became all about the DNA. And we had less character storylines and more just, I became the guy in the morgue that was like, I would get the 2-page speeches with all the terminology because my accent made it sound like I knew what I was talking about. But it was very. So
it ultimately wasn't fulfilling for you when things shifted into that format. Is that what you're saying?
I had a moment when I remember whinging about it to someone, and then they were like, "Well, at least you're working." And I started thinking, "This is amazing. Okay, fine. This will be a stepping stone to something else, maybe more creative, but appreciate what I have." And I had a moment when I was going to quit the show. For a long story. I had a manager and someone else in my ear that kept telling me that if they didn't pay you so much money, you should quit. And all it was that the manager was trying to get renegotiation money. He even admitted it later. Nasty little piece of work he was. And so he was like pushing me to threaten to quit. And we'd had this moment, and then I remember Miguel Ferrer, God bless him, like he called me. He's one of my co-stars, and he called me and he was like, "Hey man, we miss you on set. Come back, bro." And he's like, ride this shit into the sunset. This is a rare situation. He's like, being on any television series is so rare. He's like, you just, enjoy it for what it is, and that beautiful phone call made me feel like I was part of a family. And so I went back to the show, and it was great.
Thank you, Miguel. And I mean, think about who else was on that show. I mean, Catherine Hahn, Jerry
Catherine
Conway,
Hahn,
so many really good actors.
Mahershala Ali.
Mahershala, I mean,
he did the
come
first season.
on!
Oh, he was so lovely on the show too. He was a great character. We had this scene where we had an episode. I don't even know if you would. We always played the ambiguity of my character's sexuality.
Yeah.
And that was the other thing when I was doing it. I was like, how do I create longevity for myself? Right. So I was like, every time Jill Hennessy comes on camera as Jordan, I'm going to be looking at her like I'm in love with her. But I can't say anything. And eventually
she is a beautiful woman.
Yeah. But then the writers picked up on that. Right. And then it was like, Nigel obviously has this crush on Jordan. But I was like, I can create those dynamics with each character. Then I can, So with Mahershala, we had this lovely episode where I invite him to come with me up to a cabin for the weekend, and he doesn't know whether I want to do it as bros or more than bros. and so the whole episode is this lovely kind of awkward, is he or isn't he? And it was just lovely. It was just so many wonderful things. And then obviously Catherine Hahn, who went off she did a couple of seasons, and then she left the show to go do something else in her career. And I think what it was they were like, okay, we're going to work on your film career. So you can't be on a television series for however long. You need to come and do this with us. She was amazing. Like she came straight out of, I remember she came straight out of, I think she was an NYU graduate. And so like when she first started on the show, we're all showing her how to hit her mark, and look at where she is now. I'm so happy and pleased for her, because it couldn't be a nicer person. Couldn't be a lovelier person.
I love her attack as an actor. She's just incredible.
She's a real theater actor. Like her like on stage, that's where all of that comes from. It's why everything she does is so cool.
Extra. She pierces my heart. I just love her so much.
Yeah.
So when the show finishes, you're not a series regular on this huge popular TV show.
Yeah.
What's
Terrifying.
that been like? Like that transition?
Like, I mean, being an actor, is the only business I feel where you're constantly hired and fired. Like you're hired and fired and hired and fired. You never know season to season whether the show is going to get picked up. We should have been picked up for another season. We weren't. There was a new head of NBC who decided to cancel us when our show was actually doing really well. Yeah. He got a lot of flack for that down the road, and he kept on a show that he happened to be a producer of. So, put those Hollywood chips together. But so we got canceled. And I remember saying to an executive at one point, I think it was on our last episode, I remember saying, like, I'm really nervous about what's going to happen next, and she was like, you'll always work. And I'm like, yeah, that's not what you want to hear. And you don't want to hear, like, you'll always work. It was you hit a brick wall, right? And then you mourn. Well, depending on if you had a great experience. I was loving it even more. I had become single. I'd kind of been able to get control of my life. And
you mean you weren't hanging out at the Playboy Mansion all the time? I know all those stories.
No, of course I was. Of course I was. I was hanging out as a single guy at the Playboy Mansion.
Oh, gosh.
I went from like being the guy who was like, oh, it's not enough. The writing isn't enough. There aren't enough scenes with my character. I feel like so-and-so is taking more airtime than me, kind of these kind of insecure actor things where I just wanted so much more to be part of every storyline. I went from that to having this kind of watershed moment. I woke up in the morning and I was like, literally just enjoy what's going on here. In the last 2 years of that series, if they only wrote me in one scene, I was like, peace, great. I get paid the same, and I'm going to go to Mexico and I'll be back in a week. You know what I mean? It was like I
Yeah.
had that kind of, and it was just when I was really starting to enjoy it for what it was that the show came to an end. And
Yeah.
I
But you
remember,
have worked so much since the show. You know, you've
yeah,
been a series regular on other shows, you've done
yeah,
films, you've done
and
huge
so
video games, you know,
many
Uncharted and other
pilots.
things, animated series and all kinds of things. And
Yeah,
I know the job to job to job to job thing.
yeah.
So after that watershed moment, what do you focus on now with your career? Whether it's
So
being an actor, a writer, a director,
yeah,
a producer, a magician, you know, I mean, you just wear so many hats. You're always creating. So if we're going to draft off that watershed moment, what is it that you're looking for now as a
the next
storyteller?
step, right? The step up from there. You. In the old days, when you came to LA, they told you that you would build your quote, your fee would build with more experience. The more experience you had, the more you could charge, right? And that the more experience you had, the more exposure you had, the better roles and opportunities you would get. That just never pans out anymore. It's not that way anymore. Corporations made it so that I saw this come in the last couple of years of Crossing Jordan when General Electric took over Universal, and the attitude of like instead of the corporate, so the attitude, the work attitude was always like, we're lucky to have you. We're so happy to be working with you and happy that we're here together working, creating this project, right? We appreciate who you are. It changed from that to, you're lucky to have a job. That became the attitude. That
Yeah.
became the energy. And so that's what happened to Hollywood. You went from, hey, I've worked and created, I've learned, I've created, I have an audience, I have experience, I have all these hours, 250 hours of TV. That should be worth something to, yeah, you're lucky if we give you scale, right? So this is where the industry was heading. So I finished Crossing Jordan, and my goal was to find an agent that this manager guy who had completely manipulated me and my ex, fired him. And I was like, I need to find it. I need to find an agent, a manager, someone to be able to take the exposure that I've had. I'm coming off of a network television series, to the next level. And I ended up choosing someone, and I made a series of really bad mistakes, just like the people I chose, the people I decided to go with. I thought were experienced and weren't. I was lied to about somebody's experience. Like, but so it was a couple of things. So the show was a popular show, Crossing Jordan. It wasn't an industry watch show, right? There's two kinds of shows you get. You get
Yes.
the NCIS, you get the Crossing Jordans of the world that are these procedural, massive juggernaut shows that have, 30, 40, 50 million viewers, and they're not watched by the industry. So
Yeah.
the industry watches The Sopranos. The industry is like Game of Thrones. So Crossing Jordan was a success and a hit, but no one in the industry knew me from it.
Yeah.
So suddenly I was like, I had all of these credits, that I had this experience, but still I was back to square one, and no one bloody knew me. And it was like before the show, before I started the series, and it was
Mm.
shocking, like, and so it was. The person I ended up being repped by really had no experience as a manager, which was a shock. And I went from a series of agent to agent to agent, trying to get someone who could make a difference and make a dent. And my whole career has always been about transcending what everyone thinks I can do. So I remember meeting an agent, big agency, who said no. And I was like, I just got off a television series, I'm like, I couldn't. And he was like, yeah, we're not going to rep you. And then later on, I was told a year or so later, when I got another series. Oh no, this was before Crossing Jordan. I've met this guy before Crossing Jordan, interviewed for their agency. They'd said no. And then it was like 2 months later, I got Crossing Jordan. And that agent to this day will do actor workshops where he'll talk about like things how everybody makes mistakes. Remember this guy, Steve Valentine, came in and we said no, and he went off to do Crossing Jordan. And I'm like, the fact that I just want to say fuck you to that guy. I don't want to be a story, like I'm a no, I don't want to be a story that you tell in an actor's workshop. Anyway, but I just had a series of bad, like the kind of bad reps, bad luck, casting directors who didn't see me as anything other than the beginner kid that they used to see at the acting, casting director workshops back in the day before I started working. And so I felt like I was back to kind of having to bust those myths again. So I thought maybe the best thing to do is take the connections that I've made and see if I could start writing and creating my own stuff. And I remember Tim Kring was working on Heroes at the time, the TV show Heroes. And they kept telling me there was going to be something in there for me. And the years were going by, like the second season, no, nothing. I decided to write, to get the rights to a book called The Gourmet Detective. Again, someone comes up to me at a party, right? Says, what are you doing now that Crossing Jordan's over? And I was so tired of people asking me that question. I remember getting quite cranky. I don't know, I'm going to audition for other stuff, I guess. And she said, there's a book I just read called The Gourmet Detective. You'd be perfect for the lead in that. You should get the rights to it. And then she walked off, and I never saw her since. And I remember looking up who had the rights, and I got the rights to the book easily. I just for like under $1,000, I got the rights to all 8 books.
Wow!
And actually, all 7 books. The original book, which was the main one that we wanted because it had the title The Gourmet Detective, was the rights to that book. It was published by an English publisher. And I remember my lawyer calling me and saying, we can't get the rights to that book. He wants too much money. And I said, what's his name? And they were like, his name's Martin Brees. And I went, I know Martin. Martin's a magician. Martin had a magic shop when I was a kid in London.
Here we go. This magic connection again.
I'm like, you can't write this stuff. And I called Martin. I was like, you don't remember me, but I used to come in once a month with my dad. I bought this from you. I bought that from you, from your magic studio in London. And by the end of the conversation, he's like, all right, I'll let you have the rights to the book.
Oh.
Anyway, so I got the rights to Gourmet Detective. And then I was doing an episode of Monk, and Randy Zisk was the director, and I told him about it, and I was like, I'd love to get you attached as showrunner. And he read the book and he was like, yeah, let's do it. And we sold it. We sold it like 3 times and it just didn't get made. We sold it to USA Network, first of all, and then UAP, and then somewhere else. And we came so close so many times. In the end,
that's the business.
Right?
That's what you sign up for, don't you? When you're an actor, when you're a creative person. I mean, we all have these stories as actors.
People will think you haven't been working, and you have been. You've been making pilots.
You've worked constantly the whole time I've known you, and just being that jobbing actor. So tell me about deciding, now that you talked about how you don't like people pulling the veil back and showing how magic tricks are done.
Yes.
Take me into the decision to launch Magic on the Go all those years ago, and deciding you want to show people how to do magic the way that you would like to do it. So I remember looking on your website when you first launched it and you sent it to me, and you talk on the video about how with magic, you just need a mentor. You need a guide to show you, how to move through this, which I thought was such a lovely way of introducing it to someone who wants to enter this world and learn some tricks and help people feel all those things that you feel, which is why you love it so much. So
I just remember.
So what do you get out of that? What's the juice there for you?
I remember having a mentor, how important that was, because they curate the experience for you, a mentor, right? A mentor will take their years of education and experience and tell you what you need to know. And that wasn't out there. And magic at the time when I came back into it, it was suffering badly by people weren't reading books as much. They weren't learning the history as much. And we stand on the shoulders of these giants and nobody in the piece. So they're reinventing everything. And I'm like, well, that was from 1930s. That's not yours. You didn't invent that. But there was this, predominance of single trick, what we call single trick DVDs, which is a single trick with a DVD that's sold for like $40-50. And that's how that generation was learning their magic. And instead of amassing a wealth of knowledge so that you can handle anything in any situation, they were learning 6 tricks and putting them into an act. And that was all they knew. And
Yeah.
I just saw this kind of disrespect for magic kind of predominating, and it made me sad. So over the course of making the one-man show, I had investigated one particular trick, the trick that my mentor had tried to teach me, which was called 10 cards to pocket, which is a really hard trick.
I've seen you do that
Right?
trick.
It's bloody, it's brutal. And
Whoa.
it's so hard. And what I discovered was there was a time in history where everyone was doing the trick. Everyone in vaudeville, it was a standard, it was a trick everyone was doing. And then slowly through time, people stopped doing it. And I wanted to know why. I was like, why? So then I created this project called C2P Cards to Pocket, which was kind of all the research that I did put on film. And it was something like 120 separate videos and all of these different ways of doing it, the history, who did it first and who did it like that way, who did it that way and why. And it's like a doctorate thesis on one trick. And I wanted somewhere to put it other than DVD. And it made sense to put it online and make it accessible. And this stuff was just starting, the subscription OTT services. And I thought, well, I could put this online. People can subscribe to it. They can watch it on their phone. They can watch it on their iPads. They can watch it on their computers, no matter where they are in the world. They can refresh. They can learn something new. They can just listen to it while they're driving. It's like all of this, because there's a lot of, and as I teach it, they'll get to see it as opposed to, read it. And in everything I teach, I talk about everything. I talk about like history, performance, how to do it, as well as how to do it. So I feel like I hit all the areas that I had to hit when I had a mentor, when he was, he would send me away and say, come back and do it again next week, but better. Or, how about looking up at me as you speak, where's your eye contact? Where's your, all of those things that we don't get from just buying a single trick on a DVD. And so it just grew from there. And it became a place where I would just put all of my creativity. And then when I started kind of looking at the history of magic and all of these tricks that were getting lost and all these little old pamphlets and booklets that nobody has anymore, I would cherry pick the best things, make it, learn it. So I literally I've learned and performed every single thing on that website. That's over 900 pieces of material, right? Sleight of hand, you name it. But also what I discovered, which was amazing, was that when you teach something, there is a shortcut that opens up in the back of your brain to creativity, right? So now if you sit down and you try and be creative, it's blank page time, right? It's writer's block. But when I learn a trick and I teach it to camera or to somebody specifically, but normally just a camera, as I'm speaking, my subconscious is throwing out variations and ideas. And it's just like it
Ooh,
comes out and goes, it kind of comes
I
out
love
here and
that.
goes in here. And I'm like, oh, and also you could do this. And hang on a minute, here's a better idea, literally while I'm on camera. So
Yeah.
teaching became a selfish way of getting new material because I know that I can teach this older trick. I can figure out how to improve it. So there's a better reason for teaching it. But then all of these other ideas will flourish. So I would say now in my one-man show, 90% of what's in that show is original because it all came like the 10 cards to pocket that I do at the end of the show is not at all how my old mentor Dick Turpin used to do it. And the ending is completely original. It's just like it all just came out of teaching. So I find it to be probably the most consistent thing I've done in my entire life because I add new material every month since
Yeah.
2017, you know?
And it sounds like it's a love letter to Dick
It is.
Turpin, to
It's a
other
love letter to the
magicians,
art form.
to the history. You're such a history buff. Like it's another thing I love about you. Like we're having a conversation. Oh, did you know where that comes from? Because back in the day, blah 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 blah. They did this. I just go, how does he know all these random facts about history? You're
I make
such
no
a.
attempt to memorize anything. It's just
I
what
mean,
sticks, sticks. I see it with my
it's
son. My son
just
knows everything
unbelievable.
about Brawl Stars and Pokemon. He can name every single card in the Pokemon deck to tell you
Theo.
what the energy is. But if I ask him to remember to tidy his desk at school, it's an
Yeah,
issue. You know what I mean? It's
yeah,
just like the things
totally.
that you love will stick, and
Yeah,
it just
but I mean,
always
your memory for history, your love of it, your respect of it, it comes through
yeah,
in everything that you do.
exciting. Well, do
So
you know the thing is with history is like, so there's a magic magazine called The Magic Wand, which went from 1901 to 1945 or so. So like 45 years of this magic magazine that came out every month. So that magazine is a time capsule of how life
yeah,
changed in England over 45 years. It went through
yeah.
a Russian Revolution and 2 world wars, right? And you see, as you read the articles, if you start at the beginning, which is so fun, you read all these articles in them, and not just how tricks are done, but there's articles on like, is magic dead? What should magicians wear? How I approach stuff. It's just like, this guy is nicking my material, like nothing ever changes. But you get to know the columnists, and then they'll talk about how this columnist now is at he went off to war. He was conscripted and he's off to war. And there's one guy, Medrington. I remember I loved his columns. And then one day I was reading an issue, and he'd been killed in the war, and it
Wow.
was almost like I was reading it like it was actually happening then and there.
Yes.
So you read all these magazines, and it's all this history, like magic tricks that were done with steel, but then there wasn't steel available anymore. So now they had to make them out of Bakelite, which was a new kind of plastic. And then they had issues with getting eggs and silk handkerchiefs, and then they had the rationing, and then the guy that makes the magazine, his business gets blown up in the Blitz, and
Yeah.
you just see life through the eyes of the people working as magicians, and I find that to
Yes.
be fascinating because
That is fascinating. So I
it
want to
just
ask
continues.
you,
Yeah.
as a magician who celebrates other magicians, I mean, when I'm
Yes.
at the Magic Castle and I see you with your colleagues, you just marvel at each other and celebrate each other. And there's this camaraderie, fraternity. It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
So, how do you feel, going back full circle to what we were saying about at the beginning, how you love to make people feel like anything is
Great.
possible, feeling like that
Yeah.
child that's full of possibility and wonder? What do you feel when you're watching other magicians do a trick that you don't do? Are you able to put yourself in that place of just enjoying and watching it unfold without trying to figure out how they do it, or catching them out? Or what's it like for you as a magician
It's
experiencing
either very
magic?
joyful or very painful. So it'll be if someone shows me something, and this is what every magician wants, to be fooled, right? Because it
Yeah.
reminds us why we like
It's like
magic.
Penn and Teller on that
Yeah.
show where the
Yeah.
magicians do the trick and they've got to figure it out. Yeah, I love that
And
show.
if
I
you
watched that
look at
with my
something and
dad.
you go like, I have no idea holy crap.
Yeah.
I have no idea what you just did. We get that
Oh,
moment. We get that little bit of hit of dopamine that
yeah.
reminds us why we do it. If someone does a trick and they're really horrible as a performer, it is the most painful thing for me to see. I know a magician here in town in Toronto who's I call him the maestro. He's wonderful, but he doesn't go out. He won't go to a magic show anymore because he said to me, it's too painful. He said, if I see something, he said, I just can't stomach it. It's because you love it so much. You love the art form. But I remember deciding, when I decided to get back into magic, I hadn't been to the Magic Castle in 10 years. And I
That's
remember
right. I
going
remember
back up
that.
there for the
Yeah.
first time and thinking like, oh, are they going to think I'm a dick because I stopped going, or because I renounced the magic, or because, and I remember walking in and just everybody being like, yo, Steve, where you been? We're so proud of you. It was so lovely. It was
Oh,
so
it is a
heartwarming because we don't
beautiful
have that in
energy there.
acting. In
Yeah.
acting, I can't walk into a bar and a bunch of actors go, "Oh, it's great to see you." No, they're like, "Why are you in town? What are you auditioning for? You're taking my parts." That's what we. But in
Oh,
magic, I can travel the world. I can go to a magic shop like in Auckland. I did it in
oh,
Argentina. I
yeah.
went to a magic shop in Argentina, said hi. I was filming something there, and they ended up like taking me out for dinner, showing me Buenos Aires. And
Mm.
we have this, and now I'm going to go in July. I'll be in Italy, in Torino. I was asked to give a talk at the World Championships of Magic, which is called FISM. I'm going to go and give a lecture there, and they just love. They're like, come early. It's Italy. Stay late. Like enjoy. We'll show you
Oh,
around, and this
yeah.
is one of the greatest parts of being a magician is that camaraderie
Yeah,
that
that
comes with it.
family like you
Yeah. I mean, not
felt
to
when
say
you
there's
were
not a lot of dysfunction, because there
Sundance
is, there
Sorcerers.
can be,
Yeah.
there can be cliques and there can be, uh, all that kind of crap. But at the same time, I do enjoy that, where I can be in a city and someone will say, I'm a magician. Let's have lunch,
Yeah.
whatever.
Oh, I love it. Oh, look, I could talk to you all day long, as we have done many days and nights.
as
Just
we
talked and
have.
talked, talked the day and the night away.
But
So I
wait, sorry,
always,
I gotta say, Tess, because this is
yeah,
what about me, right? And why not me? Why not me?
yeah.
I want to tell you this because there was a why not me moment in my life that I'll never forget. I always had, when I was trying to break in as an actor, this quiet confidence that something somewhere would be right for me and would show up. I just always believed it. And I remember I was doing this acting workshop. I don't know if you ever did Real Pros. Did you ever do that? There was a
Oh, I did
casting
lots of
director.
those
Yeah.
workshops.
Kind of like those rip-offs where you have to basically pay to see a casting director.
Yes.
You do a scene and you get I'm doing air quotes here for the audience, critique. Um, if the person can even stay awake during class. And I remember doing a lot of these, and I was doing one day, and this guy comes up to me and he's like, "I've got to ask you a question." And I was like, "Yeah," and he goes, "Do you really think you're going to work as an actor?" And I said, "What?" And he goes, "Do you really think you could break in?" And I said, "Yeah, why not?" And he said, "Well," he said, "look at me." He said, "I'm short, I'm fat, I'm bald, I'm Jewish." He said, "I can play doctors, I can play lawyers." He said, "There's all of these different parts that I can play." He said, "And I was just thinking, just coming from a place of reality, like what kind of roles could you play?" He said, "You're tall, you're skinny, you got long hair, big forehead, large teeth." He's like, "I just don't,
Okay.
to this day, I don't know why he felt the need to say this to me. But I remember being angry for a second and then just saying to him, something's going to come along. I just know it will. I said, Jack Nicholson was famous because he couldn't get work and then he became his own type. Maybe I'll become my own type. A role will come up where I'm the perfect guy for that. And then it wasn't maybe 6 months later that I got Crossing Jordan. And one day, I think it was season 2, who comes in as a guest star to play a lawyer? And it was the universe gave me this moment, but the universe also said, how are you going to handle it? Right? Here's a
Oh,
challenge for
please
you.
tell me
Here's a
you were
challenge.
gracious. Please tell me you
So
were
gracious.
gracious.
I was so lovely. I was like, let me show you around. So great to see you. Introduced them to everyone, showed them where craft service was. And then I just had my one moment where I said, okay, this is my trailer. I need to go work on my lines, but I'll see you on set. And I just kind of left him there. And I also made sure that I walked in past my car park spot, because one of the greatest things
So
about
not
working
so
closely,
gracious.
it was totally gracious. I didn't even point it out. I didn't have to. But I walked in past, because one of
Oh,
the things that happens when you're in a television series is everyone's excited to be there season 1. I remember telling an actor this when he was getting a show and he's like, can you give me some advice? And I was like, well, season 1, you can't believe you're on a television series, right? You do it for free, but you don't want to tell anyone. You can't believe you're on TV. Season 2, you're excited you've come back for season 2. You'd like to have a little more writing, but that's okay because you're really happy. And maybe you'll get a new car. So you upgrade your car, right? And you've got your parking space signed finally. You've got your sign and your parking space, so you feel like you've made it. Season 3, now you're hoping for renegotiation money because the show's doing really, really well. And they're not paying you enough for the work that you're putting in. But damn it, you're like, I guess we'll just keep going. Hopefully we'll get season 4. And you upgrade your car again. Season 4, you are, fuck this, I want to do movies. Right? and you're like, God damn it, I wish they'd write less. And I got, my personal chef needs to go home early, and I've got a party, and I'm dating this girl. And
oh.
season 5, you can't wait to be out of there. This is like the general trajectory of an actor in a television series. And then the show gets canceled, and you wished you were on a television series again. But that's because the thing that happens is no one can prepare you for what it feels like to get a television series the first time. There is nothing anybody can say. It is a psychological mindfuck, because you go from being a struggling actor when no one cared to suddenly being number 2, 3, 4 on the call list. Everyone's pandering to your needs because they need you there on time. They want to make sure you're happy, healthy, can get the work done. It's a whole nother vibe. So unless you've got a good control on who you are as a human being, it's going to go to your head. You're going to get, and I I can tell an actor who's on a television series. If I meet an actor, I can tell you whether they're in a series currently or whether they've been on a series. When they've been on a series, there's a certain understanding and awareness of the world and how things can come and go. Maybe even a
Yeah.
slight bitterness. When it's their first series, like the world is their oyster, they're cocky, everyone's, they wear $1,000 clothes. There's just, their skin looks amazing, their hair looks amazing because they're going through the Hollywood car wash on a daily basis. And it's true. So the other thing that it does is you find out who your friends are, right? Because when you get a television series, there's going to be people who are incredibly happy for you. They don't want anything. They're just happy for you. They're the people that always supported you. They're the people who kind of knew it was going to happen at some point. Then you get the people who are incredibly jealous, who can't help but let it be known that you don't deserve to be where you are. Those people drop off because they just can't stand being around you. Then there are those who will try and use you. A number of people who would send their headshots to casting and say, "I'm a friend of Steve Valentine's," without
Yeah.
asking me if I would refer them, and then there are those who are the narcissists who feel the need to try and control you. And those are the ones who say things like, "Don't let it go to your head. Don't try and be a big timer. Don't get cocky now, because they're afraid that you are bigger than them, or it is going to your head, or that you've exceeded who they are." And the reality is, and because I've said this to so many people I know who have got series, is you have to change. Like if you when you become successful in any business, you have to change. I'm sure Tess now is a different Tess to when you first started the business, because you've learned so much about business, people, promotion, industry, how not to waste your time, friendship, right?
Absolutely. But I think that ultimately it doesn't matter what industry you're in, how much money you make, how successful you are, who you know, whatever. To me, like you, having met huge stars, being around people from all walks of life, people that have not 2 cents to rub together all the way up to billionaires, it's still the universal truth, which is just be good to yourself and be good to other people.
Yeah.
And be honest and generous of spirit.
Yeah.
And so to me, I just go back to the same core of what my parents taught me as a child, and
Sure.
me because we're friends, my goodness, I've made millions of dollars. I've had $67 in my bank account. You know what I mean? Like it's just
Me too.
completely run the gamut for me, as
Yeah.
I know it has for you.
Yeah.
And so really, I always think about what's the big takeaway from a conversation with someone. And, our
Mhm.
conversation today has really been about staying present, noticing the magic, looking for the signs,
Yeah.
and being honest and true to who you are. And I think that
Yeah.
ultimately, regardless of what happens, and the marketing 101, right, that no one's going to do it for you.
No
You've
one's
got to
going to do it
use your
for you.
voice and put it out there. I mean, you and I have spoken about this many times together. So I always close every episode with the same question, which is
Okay.
for someone who has a dream in their heart, which is
Yeah.
all of us, but doesn't
All of us.
feel like they have what it takes to make it happen, what would you say to them?
Well, you have what it takes to make it happen, first of all. So if I can make it, anyone can make. My story is I came from a small town in Southend-on-Sea and ended up on a Hollywood television series with no formal training. If I can do that, if I can bullshit my way onto a network show, anyone can do anything. I'm not a gorgeous, handsome guy. I'm a character actor. I'm not a Brad Pitt. I an English accent in an American world. But somehow, I had a belief in myself that somehow, somewhere along the lines, if I kept at it, if I kept present, if I stayed in town, if I stayed aware, it would happen. And you can't sit on your laurels and wait for the phone to ring. That was one of the biggest lessons. You do have to be working all the time towards your goal, whether it's skill sets or connections or whatever. But if I can do it, and I'm no one with no connections anywhere, everyone listening here today can do anything. I really believe it. And Um, I I prove it to myself time and time again because I jump into arenas that I shouldn't be in, feet first, and learn on the way, like writing scripts or pitching television shows, or now I'm going to start a podcast, which I've never done before. So it's like I'm always
Yay!
doing something, right? Because but you got to fucking
Why not
believe in
me?
yourself.
Going back to
Why
what
not
you
me?
were saying before.
How many people here, raise your hands, in the podcast world have listened to a really bad podcast? Right. You can do better, right? Okay. So there you go. That's how I feel about everything. I've seen great actors. I've seen shitty actors who get a lot of work. I'm like, well, then why not me? All right. I've seen good magicians. I've seen not very good magicians who are working all the time. So I'm pretty good. So why not me? Right. So
Yeah.
I think that mantra is so powerful. And that moment when the guy says to me, like, do you really think you're going to make it? Why not? I was like,
Yeah.
why not? Why not me? And
Thank
that's
you.
and
Yes,
and and I've just
I
seen the proof
love
again and
that.
again.
I'm going to say that to myself today because I'm struggling with something right now. So why not me? I love
Why
it.
not
This
me?
has like set me on fire. Oh,
Yeah,
thank you so much. I love you.
I love you too. Oh, this has been great. I could talk to you forever, and I
I
probably would
know.
if you didn't shut me down.
Oh, well, we will continue and have many more conversations, but
I
thank
look
you
forward.
for
I look forward to
being
it.
here for this one.
All right, darling. Mwah. Bye now. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Go get your dreams.
He just shows up as himself, no matter what. I find it so refreshing. I loved what he was saying about magic not being about fooling people with tricks. It's about how you make somebody feel. And magic opens us up to the wonder of play and possibility and takes us back to that childlike feeling that anything is possible. Oh, that's what I love about it. And I particularly enjoyed what he was saying about noticing the magic in your own life, staying present, looking for the signs, being honest and true to who you are, and that you've got to use your voice and put it out there to make the magic happen, that you take part in creating it. And you've got to claim what you want, that no one's going to do it for you. You've got to be working all the time towards your goal and believing in yourself. I love his why not me philosophy. If they can do it, I can do it. That there's something about having that quiet confidence where you believe that at some point you can achieve that thing that you want. And I loved his mentor, Dick Turpin, what he got from him about always be learning. He was learning stuff in his 80s, and his mantra was you have to stay sharp to stay alive. I really, really enjoyed that. And being open to all possibilities and not getting locked into one outcome. When he said things never turn out the way you think, and often it's better that God laughs at the plans. Gosh, I've certainly experienced that in my life. And I really appreciated his honesty about the emotional journey that he's gone on in his career, where he was on a hit NBC TV show with Crossing Jordan, but it wasn't sort of what he thought it was going to be. He didn't get the scenes he wanted, and he got quite jaded and sort of thought, well, forget it. I'm out, and didn't want to do it anymore. And then Miguel talked him back, and said, this is a family, you're on a show, be grateful. You're one of the actors in the world that's got this experience. And he was on a show with, greats like Catherine Hahn and, Mahershala Ali. And I mean, what an amazing experience. So that watershed moment where he went, you know what? I'm just going to enjoy what I'm doing. So I really loved the honesty about that, because I think that we can all fall into that. And then isn't it wonderful when someone in our life can help pull us back into that place of gratitude and putting the lens on what is amazing? And he said, you know what? I'm getting paid no matter what. I'm going to go to Mexico. I'm going to do my one scene and I'm going to enjoy being with all these lovely actors. And you don't get those moments back. So just, stay in the moment and celebrate what's great about it. I also found it really interesting what he was talking about, the value of teaching. That when you teach something, there's a shortcut that opens up in the back of your brain to creativity. And when he's teaching, his tricks for magic on the go, his subconscious is throwing out, variations and ideas and figuring out ways to improve things. Yeah. So, I love that, that um, Maya Angelou quote, when you learn, teach. There's something about teaching other people what you know. It's just very fulfilling, but it can also lead to, open up different paths for your own development and growth. And, when he said, be authentically you, lean into what makes you different. Your uniqueness is your superpower. I think that's my big takeaway from the episode. So I have got all of Steve's links in the show notes. My goodness, if you have an opportunity to see him perform live, it is truly, truly magical. So yeah, let me know in the Facebook group what resonated with you from this episode.
I want to hear about your It Has To Be Me story. So head on over to ithastobeme.com/stories to share it in our free community. You can also join the conversations we're having about this episode and others. I'm Tess Masters. Join me next week and we'll dive inside another great story to help us go from dreaming to doing.